Hey everybody, it's Brian here, just popping in right at the top to let you all know that we have a Discord now. That's right, we have an official Worst of All Possible Worlds Discord server. And how may I join that? You may ask or may not ask. Well, don't worry if you didn't ask, because I asked for you. So the answer is that you go to our Patreon, patreon.com/worstofall, and sign up. And it's linked right there in the Patreon. You join the Patreon, you join the Discord server. If you have Discord. If you don't have Discord, you won't join the Discord server. But you can at any time if you are subscribed to us over at patreon.com/worstofall. So come on in and join the fun. Anyway, on with the show.
So I went to a wedding this past week in California, and I got to spend some... Yes, and Brian, you were also there for a brief amount of time. We like high-fived in the air.
It was my wedding. I'm married.
Congratulations to Brian on his nuptials.
It was very hard to get us all, the entire sea into that church, but I was very proud of you.
Is that a comment about her weight?
Okay, so I got to hang out with my parents, which was really lovely, and we got to talking about the show, about the Worst of All Possible Worlds, and I mentioned that I didn't, really know too much about Star Trek, and that was sort of a very common language amongst the two of you, and suddenly my mom perks up.
It just lights up like a Christmas tree.
She's like, do you remember the episode where it was a bunch of heads in jars? It was like Aristotle or Plato, and they all had their heads in these jars, and they were just like talking about like current events or whatever.
Isn't that Futurama?
No, that's what I also thought.
She's making a reference to a couple of things, one of them being, I think, the Gamesters of Triskelion.
Okay.
But their brains...
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
They do, but there are a couple points. There are a couple different arena episodes. One where historical figures are summoned to fight each other.
Yeah, Mom was like, "Oh, do you need me to get the name of the episode?" And I'm like, "No. I have fact checkers in real time."
Yeah. And then there's also Plato's Stepchildren. That's another episode. That's the one that has the first interracial kiss between a black person and a white person on television.
And that's Uhura and Kirk, right?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm really excited for when we eventually get to Star Trek. But my mom was just like, she lit up, right? And she was talking about these brains in jars, apparently.
Yeah.
And she was just like, "I think that's kind of my nirvana." And I was like, being a head in a jar?
Sure.
It's like, yeah, just living forever, talking about current events. And I think a lot about why I love The Simpsons so much. And if it ever needed to be proven to be, it's because my mom is Marge in the one very particular way, in that she finds her potatoes and she just thinks they're neat.
When I was first watching The Simpsons, I watched through it in 2020. Right.
Yeah.
It was very late in my life.
Very recent. That's wild.
Because it is such a part of your programming now.
Yeah.
And I kind of just would have assumed it always would have been, because it's so your shit.
Yeah. It's also sort of the inverse of most people's experience with The Simpsons, which is that they get their references from The Simpsons.
Right.
You knew the references going into
because I watched a lot
The
of old
Simpsons.
TV growing up. And there's a point when they start figuring out how to write Marge.
Yeah.
And a lot of it really is oh, that is my mother. That is to a T. And there's a point where I said to my mom, I was like, I just watched this episode where they go to a Renaissance fair. It's the episode where Lisa marries Mandy Patinkin. At the beginning, Marge is so excited at this Ren fair, and she comes across a loom, and she's like, watch this. And she weaves out very quickly, "Hi, Bart, I am writing on a loom." And I was just like, that's Mom. And so I told her about this scene, and she's like, "Why do you think that? Is it because of the loom?" And I said, "What loom?" She's like, "Oh, the loom that I used to have when I was in high school."
My good old-fashioned loom.
And I was like,
that I never told you about?
Yeah, no, Mom, you're actually more like Marge than I realized.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast recorded on a loom. I am the Worst of All Possible AJs.
I'm the Worst of All Possible Brians.
And I'm the Worst of All Possible Joshes. We're back with you for yet another case study in the pop culture of a dying empire.
That's right.
This time around, We're actually taking a look at one of my favorite movies.
Yep.
And
Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
That's
The
wrong,
only true
Brian.
masterpiece in the Marvel canon.
He's talking about Alex Strangelove, the teen comedy on Netflix about a boy discovering that he's gay.
We are talking about Stanley Kubrick's classic motion picture, Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Ooh, you did the read from the trailer.
I don't know. That doesn't sound real. That no one would make something with that long a title.
Is that because you make things with
I
long
make
titles?
things with long
Yeah,
titles.
yeah, gotcha.
Oh no, that was an AJ Lore joke. Was that not clear?
I'm making a joke about me and sort of my own whole deal.
Yeah, we named our podcast The Worst of All Possible Worlds.
What did you expect?
But yeah, like this is one that I remember watching quite a while ago, and it was exciting to come back to this one because somebody who was at our live show in Colorado Springs, bid on our charity auction for Prism, the queer community shelter there in Colorado Springs.
We will link that in the description below.
Yes.
Go give them some money.
Give them some money. Just do it. And they're doing great work. And one of the people who donated quite a bit of money was Nick Gulley. Thank you, Nick, for giving far more money. In the case of all of this stuff for the auction, everybody donated far more than I think any of us were expecting.
We were floored by your generosity. And you sent us a list of 5 topics that we could pick from. And you requested that Doctor Strangelove be a fancy movie time movie, but Josh loves this movie so much. We were like, this has to go on the main feed because there's
a movie
so
that
much
Josh
to talk
actually watched. First of all,
right.
It's a miracle in its own right.
It's true.
Yeah,
and it's like, this is definitely a worst of all possible worlds movie to talk about.
So. Oh, for sure. And there's also other topics on that list, which we had always kind of wanted to do anyway. So you're really getting your money.
You might get more than you thought, Nick. It might take a while.
It might take a while, but we will get there.
They're all really good recommendations.
And this is also, I just want to say that somebody also bid on a commercial to be made, and that person has not contacted us yet.
Yeah,
so
if you ended up in our spam folder, we apologize. Just try sending us an email again or contacting us on Patreon or wherever. But send me ideas because I really would love to write that commercial. And, you know, if you don't also just want to give money, that's fine. No pressure, but I'd love to write free if it can.
But let's sort of get to the topic at hand today. This motion picture.
Yeah, Josh, when did you first see this? Was this a kid movie for you?
I think I probably saw it definitely as a teenager.
Cool.
Because there was a pure...
It's a high school movie.
It is. It's very much like you see this when you're fucking 16 or whatever. You're like, blow, you know.
Yeah.
There's a few movies that are sort of in this world for me, this time where I was sort of identifying kind of what my political alignment is and also getting a better sense of my own personal aesthetic. And I think the thing about this movie was that it just hit on so many things so effectively and managed to be a movie that was both really funny and really thought-provoking, which maybe sounds like a very that
it makes you laugh, but it also makes you think.
Right? Like it's like, shut the fuck up. But I don't know, it just hit me in a particular way, and it was really great coming back to it this time around because it's a lot funnier than I even remember it being.
Me too.
Like actually laugh out loud funny.
Yeah, in a way that I remember chuckling at it my first watch through it, but this time I was like genuinely had to pause it and take a lap because it was so fucking funny. And also bleak. My God. Talk about a movie that drops the bomb and is not afraid to show you like the carnage.
Which is also part of why I think it's so funny. And I think like when you get a little bit older, you have more of a frame of reference for, I don't know, life. And there's something about seeing these absolute fucking cretins in the way that they control everything and being like, oh, just like in real life.
I think growing up and seeing real life is really important because like as a kid, you can see these guys sort of archetypically. It's like, oh, here they're written, you know, they have silly names. They're very broad. But then when you're an adult and you meet especially other men, you're like, oh, these are just actual guys I have encountered in my life.
Yeah, these are real guys. And especially if you start going into the conspiracy forums, you're going to meet a lot of Jack Rippers. You know, the communists are coming for my cummies.
That's right, AJ.
And I've got a whole section about water fluoridation for later.
I am so excited to get into that. So
let me just take a big sip of tap water.
Oh no, you can't! The communists. So Brian, So, Brian, when did you first see this movie? Was this a kid movie for you?
No. The only Kubrick movie that I saw as a child was 2001, which I saw a shit ton.
I have never seen that
all
movie.
the time because my dad's a big space boy.
Sure.
So, 2001, very important in my family.
Yep.
And then it was probably... There was like a point where my brother would come back from college and then we'd rent a bunch of movies from Blockbuster and then just like marathon them at night. So this might have been one of those where it's just like, okay, let's just watch all this shit that like is part of some, Big Lebowski and Fight Club and everything. And so it's like,
I love Big Lebowski.
Like, of course, like let's include Dr. Strangelove and The Shining into that.
Yeah.
And I think that I probably watched it with my brother then. And yeah, I mean, great movie. I don't know if it totally like blew my mind at the time because I think my expectations for it were built up by all the things around that referenced it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Watchmen and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And so I may have been more just caught off guard by exactly what the movie is because I had sort of, you just sort of build something up after a while.
And there's so many moments that are part of the verbal and visual vernacular of American culture. Gentlemen, no fighting. This is the war room. That's a big one.
The big fucking ring light over the big fucking table, right?
Yep. The guy riding the bomb down at the end. Spoiler for the end of Dr. Strangelove, I guess.
That's the one I remember because that's on The Simpsons.
Right.
Okay.
And they
him riding the
recreate
bomb.
even the weird like composite shot nature on The Simpsons of Homer riding that bomb down. They like meticulously put that together so it has that same sort of weird pacing as that scene.
I'm really excited to actually talk about that moment in particular because I actually remember watching this movie and I remember that scene being completely different than what I think it actually is.
Because The Simpsons had kind of wormed its way in there.
It had warped its way into my mind.
You had your own fucking Mr. Burns moment.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. This was not my first Kubrick, but it was probably one of my first.
Okay.
I think weirdly, my first Kubrick was Clockwork Orange, which is a really horrifying one to start
How old were
with.
you?
I think I was in high school when I saw Clockwork for the first time.
Okay.
AJ, I've never asked you this, but I just had the thought. Did you ever think about doing film school? Was that ever of interest to you? Or
not particularly, because film to me always felt more math. Like it was about. I'm not a big.
I think
visual
Kubrick would have
thinker.
agreed with you.
Kubrick would have been like, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it always. I'm not a big visual thinker necessarily. I think mostly in words and like the things I can conjure in my head. But like in terms of like compositing a shot, I'm not particular. That's not my forte. It's also why I'm not really a director because I have a hard time making those pictures sing on stage. But my buddies certainly do. All of my childhood friends went into film, and I saw that they had much more aptitude for that. But I was much more in it for the dialogue, which, as we'll learn about Kubrick, was a thing that he didn't particularly care about too much.
It's interesting,
especially in the early days.
I mean, part of why I asked is that, and now we're getting into the deep Josh lore here. Is that I did for a time want to be a filmmaker, actually.
Oh wow!
And
I didn't know that.
the whole
You
bit,
should have watched a couple of movies.
I know, right?
then.
Yeah, that would help.
But that's what's so funny was like
Yeah.
there was a period of time where I was watching a lot of movies, and then I sort of like in college really decided that theater was more the thing that I really really liked.
Yeah.
And politics.
And well, I mean, come on, I love them. Can't get enough of them. Dr. Strangelove was one of the movies that I saw. It was like this one. Office Space was another one.
Of course.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
These were the movie. Tim Burton's Big Fish, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
These were
big softy.
these were all movies that like made me as a teenager be like, wow, there's an interesting sort of visual vernacular that is being captured here that also has rhetorical effect.
Yeah.
I was very interested in that. And I think that's the
yeah.
big thing that I'm going to be interested in talking about today.
Yeah.
Old Stanley Banley Kubrick.
That's his middle name, yeah.
Yeah, I guess there's like a controversy around his middle name, which
So-
it probably didn't exist.
No, because, okay, so there is no, I could not find on the internet what his middle name is.
He probably doesn't have one.
He might not, but all of his siblings do, so that's kind of weird.
No, this is true of my grandfather.
Oh,
Yeah, on my mom's side, he had no middle name, but his siblings all had middle names.
Yeah, there's a point where
there's just like a thing that people did back then. They're like, this one doesn't get one. Who cares?
There's an interview with Anthony Burgess where he's talking about Kubrick and he refers to him as Stanley J. Kubrick.
Yeah, the Reverend Dr. James Dobson.
but again, it's like there is no like hard documentation that I could find.
Yeah,
I
people
don't
think
know.
that it's some sort of weird inside joke, like Shakespeare and his second best bed kind of thing that like no one's ever gonna know.
Yeah, but this is a filmmaker where a lot of mystique sort of surrounds him, right? Particularly on like The Shining, where it's like, what clues did he know? I mean, when people talk about the filmmaker that they think faked the moon landing, it's Kubrick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has to do with sort of his very cold, perfectionist, kind of off-putting personality.
This guy was a fucking asshole.
Yeah, well, yes, he was. Let's just say that Kubrick had his fixations.
He was neurodivergent.
Yes.
And a minor, surprisingly.
Oh my God. Stanley Kubrick was born in 1928 in New York. He grows up in the Bronx and he gets super into photography and chess. He knows the score from square one. He's counting all 64.
What is that?
Oh, it's from my new Checkers musical I have coming up.
Okay. Is that about Nixon's dog?
It's about Nixon's dog. It's the same poster as Annie, but with Nixon.
He's got the same circle eyes.
Same circle eyes.
Oh my God, somebody needs to draw that.
That's on you, listeners.
Listeners, if you would like to do a parody of the Annie poster in that style with Richard M. Nixon and his little dog Checkers, drop that shit in the comments.
The indictment will come out tomorrow. Kubrick is a terrible student, right? He plays hooky and goes to the local movie parlor to watch some double features.
Movie parlor?
Yes. It's a back room. It's
satin
a
lines
speakeasy
with curtains everywhere.
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of what theaters are.
Yeah, but
The Nickelodeon, he was cranking it out all day.
He sure
was
was
cranking it
Nickelodeon.
Oh, hey,
Oh, so he
Whoa.
Hey now.
Calm down.
This man is dead. He becomes his high school's photographer and begins to sell photographs to this magazine called Look Magazine, where he would later go on to have a full-time job. He also plays chess in Washington Square Park to earn some extra cash.
Meaning he's scamming people. He is a chess hustler.
He's hustling them?
Yeah.
I got hustled by a chess guy in Washington Square Park one time.
Was it the Arbiter?
I wouldn't
Yeah, he
even
knew the
be
score.
good enough at chess to be hustled. Like they could just own me without doing any nasty tricks.
Yeah.
No, it was fun though. I mean, I didn't lose. I think I lost like a couple bucks on it, but it was so good because like he really did a great job of trying to. He made me think that I was winning, and then he did two moves, and it was checkmate. And I was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, it's kind of like the ice cream guys who try and serve you, and
The
then they pull
Turkish
it back.
ice cream guys,
Turkish
yeah.
ice cream guys. It's like that. Like you're not paying necessarily for the ice cream.
Right.
A lot of it is the show, and
Interestingly,
that's what I think the fun part about.
actually what got Eric Adams. They pulled the ice cream out in front of him, and he was so impressed, and he was like, "Yeah,
he
I want
was." Yeah, they. There's just a bunch of texts.
We
saying,
are now the 30th left podcast to make that joke.
I don't care. Cut it."
No, it's staying.
I love that there's a text message that just says, "We have the ice cream," and Eric Adams' staffer saying "super back."
Yeah. No, they just keep texting. Whoop, ice cream gone.
No! He will not pay for this ice cream. He goes on to work a full-time job, as we said, at Look Magazine, and it sends him all around the world. He goes to Portugal. He goes to Chicago. While he's doing this, he becomes more and more obsessed with film theory. And the thing that's sort of a recurring motif with Kubrick over the course of his life is that once he gets into something, he gets really into it.
Yeah.
The man reads so many books on film, on like doing movies. He's calling production houses and being like, what are the rates for your cameras? And they tell him the rates and they're like, would you like to rent one? He's like, no, I just wanted to know the amount. And they're like, what? And he's hung up.
Yeah. The thing is, he really gets to know cameras and lenses on a almost a supernatural degree. I don't want to overplay it too much. He gets it by meticulously like looking at them and piecing things together and checking the film. When they worked on The Shining, he had them pair up every single lens with every single camera and go through and he figured out which ones were the sharpest on each camera, and that's what they had to hew to. When he found out about the Zeiss lens that was sent to the moon that had a wide open aperture that had never been made before.
You mean the one that he used to fake the moon landing, right?
The one that he used to fake the moon, the one that he had on the moon.
Right.
He actually went to the moon. They brought a whole film crew up there, but they faked it, making it look like a couple of hicks from Arkansas and Ohio were able to film it all themselves.
Yeah.
But when he got a hold of that Zeiss lens, which had like a 0.07 f-stop, and he actually made his own modifications to that lens to put it onto a movie camera. And that's why he was able to like shoot Barry Lyndon with natural candlelight, because it was such a fast lens.
Oh man, so cool. One of the great scoundrels of cinema.
Yeah.
Oh, Barry Lyndon. But yeah, so he would watch these movies. He'd go to MoMA a lot to like watch these film screenings. And the legend goes that during the silent portions of the movies, he would watch intently. And then the minute any actor started talking, he would go back to reading his paper, because he was more interested in the image composition, because at the time he was a still photographer, right? Yeah. But this film bug just really grabs hold of his mind and won't let go. He's told that in order to make a short film, it's going to cost him $40,000. He has $1,500 in the bank.
Yep.
He is able to.
So it's time to play some more chess.
Let's go, baby. And he's able to raise $4,000 just based on family and friends giving his money. He's basically doing a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter long before those things existed.
It used to be, if you were an independent filmmaker, it still kind of is, but it used to be, I think, easier to go to like every oral surgeon in the area and just be like, hey, do you want to be a movie producer? That's what the Coen brothers did.
Wasn't this a piece of Orson Welles' backstory too, if I recall correctly?
Yeah. And look, here's the thing about dentists and orthopedic surgeons in general. They really help out in the arts.
They do.
Particularly if you need any lyrics rewritten.
Oh, very funny. But it was
another AJ Lord joke.
No,
this episode is riddled with a
oral surgeon, not an orthopedic surgeon.
Oh, that's true.
Good point.
It's the same thing.
Well,
they're the bones of the mouth. My dad would get so mad at me if you heard that.
But it also goes back to the thing that we were talking about when we went on, well, there's your problem. The idea of like the dentist musical, right? Where sometimes these guys have too much money, they more money than they know what to do with. They have questionable taste, but if you can sort of secure the bag, you can get a great funding source from these guys.
This was before E-Trade and Robinhood. So they didn't have any other bullshit to send their money to.
Right. And it's like, why not support the arts?
Yeah.
Right. Why not
and
put
why
my
not
name
feed
on
your own
something?
vanity, right? You get to be the investor.
That's right.
In a movie.
Yeah. And especially when he gets a $9,000 loan later on from a pharmacist in California.
What? $9,000?
He demands that his name be like executive producer, right? It is very much a vanity thing. This thing will outlive me, and it's still on the film to this day.
Yeah.
So Kubrick used that $4,000 to make his first short film, Day of the Fight, which is a documentary of the middleweight boxer Walter Cartier, who is a lovely little Irish scallywag, in 1951, and he makes.
So at this point, he is 23. So he's still neurodivergent, but no longer a minor.
Yes, no, he has crossed over into being a neurodivergent adult.
A major.
He makes the movie for $3,900. And he sells it to RKO Pathé for $4,000.
Okay.
He makes $100.
That's not great.
So this is one way, I think, in which it's fair to say he's not an Orson Welles. He doesn't really have that knack for like making money.
Yeah, he's not.
No.
He doesn't
Selling
walk
a
into the
product.
office and just go, I can make you a movie.
Yeah.
Well, not yet. And we'll get to that in a little bit.
So many
Hey there, you are listening to a preview of a premium episode of The Worst of All Possible Worlds. If you'd like to listen to the rest of this, head on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/worstofall. And you can listen to not only the rest of this episode, but our entire backlog of premium episodes, bonus episodes, and if you subscribe at the $10 tier, you will get an extra episode of the podcast every single month. Again, that is patreon.com/worstofall. Hope to see you there.